Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had an opportunity to enjoy your lunch, but not so much so that you're too tired to continue learning. This afternoon, I think I have something very useful for us to discuss that you can see that can be implemented right away. The title of this session is going to be called Virtual Learning Management Must. And so, as we think about management, we will be discussing some strategies regarding classroom management in the virtual setting. The reason I feel that this is important because as we seek to educate our students during a pandemic, we are faced with the challenge of either teaching hybrid, where we teach in person and online, and some of us we are teaching virtually completely, and then there are some of us who are fortunate enough to actually still be able to have in-person learning with several more safety measures in place. So what happens to our classroom? How does that change what we're able to do and how we can effectively educate? I want you to just kind of take a look at the objectives and what I intend for you to walk away with today, hoping that this session is going to be very beneficial for you. One of the things that I want you to believe wholeheartedly is that you are the thermostat. That's my number one objective. I want us to become cognizant and aware of the external influences on the behavior for our students. And then last but not least, we are going to do some work with our colleagues to come up with some strategies to help teach students so that our virtual classrooms can run more efficiently and orderly and effective. So, that being the case, I want to go over some things that we gotta believe, all right, as we go into this. We believe it in the physical education classroom. We have to believe it also in the virtual. And the first one is that all students can learn. I'm not even going to ask you, do you believe this? Because I know that you believe this. That all of our students can learn. And when we say all, that means it doesn't matter what they come to the table or walk in the door with, whether they come from a single parent home or they come from a two-parent household, regardless if they come and speak another language, all right, or maybe another ethnicity or have a different socioeconomic status, they can learn. Even our students with disabilities, they can learn. Okay, another belief, all students deserve access to a high quality education, and so we want to make sure we are still setting and maintaining the standard and the rigor to push those critical thinking and challenging our students to be more analytical and also even compete with others in the outside world, because we have to also recognize that we are not just preparing students for the next grade level, but we are preparing them for life. Okay, the other belief that I want you to hold dear is that teachers make the difference, that we make the difference. It's not the background or the family or lack of family support that may be present in the home. Regardless of the facts, studies have shown, research has shown, there are certain attributes of a school that it doesn't matter what situation a student can come from, that students are able to be successful. And so with that being said, I have the quote to be the change that you want to see. And so knowing that you are that thermostat, that you set the tone, you set the gauge for that classroom environment and success. 3 other beliefs that I think are very vital as we talk about managing our classrooms. Understanding that change is a process and it's not an event. And so knowing this, understand this is a transition that we are going to at this time. There will be some errors, but we'll learn from them. And so don't expect everything to happen overnight, but understand it will be a process to teach our students. It will be a process for us to learn and even to teach ourselves. But the consistency is what's key and what's important. 2 quotes that we should never forget. One, I'm sure you've heard this before, that kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you really care about them. And so this is important because the time that is spent sowing and investing into our students and building those relationships in the physical classroom is just as important, or even more, when you're in a virtual setting, to make sure that you're intentional during those interactions with those students. And the last but not least belief is that everyone is a genius. And I love this one as we discuss equity and how there are so many students who may not be labeled systematically as gifted, but they have so much more to offer, and they may have intelligence in other areas. But the rest of this quote, it says, "But if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid." And so what are you using to measure, students' intelligence? Is one form of measurement, is that fair? Does that really sum up the complexity and the totality of what this student is and even has the potential to become? And so that's something we always want to be aware of. Again, not just in the physical classroom, but also in the virtual setting. So, this next part, as I kind of reflected on the things that we need to believe, I want us to think about outside forces. When these students come into your classroom, when they come into our virtual classrooms, what are all the external influences on their behavior? What are the things that make them respond or not respond or react the way that they do? It could be something related to their home environment. I'm not sure. But I want you to take about 3 minutes. I'm going to break you in groups. I want you to discuss with other professionals. What are some external influences that you've seen on student behaviors? And how did it manifest? How did you know it was an issue? All right? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes. And you have an opportunity to share. All right. Go ahead, click, and break out. Okay, awesome job. I really did hear some great responses. I heard some very thought-provoking discussions. And so I would like for a few groups, if you don't mind sharing some of the behaviors that you all discuss and how they manifest in the classroom. If you don't mind, you can just actually type them in the chat. Great. Okay, so looking at the chat box, we can see that there are so many, okay, an exhaustive list, right? But there are even more. The National Institute of Health Biological Science Curriculum Study, they give us a numerous amount of influences on our behaviors. And so what I want you to think about, I love this picture of the kids because we have these little humans. That's how I look about it, how I think about it. And they come to us with all of these influences when they enter our classrooms or when they show up in our virtual classrooms. And so why is that important? I think it's important because virtual learning presents even more influences. From the lack of technical use, lack of technical support, poor internet connection, your sibling distraction, your parent distractions. There's a lot going on in the virtual setting. So how can we support our students? First of all, we have to be aware that there's all of these external influences. We need to be considerate, so we have to be mindful, and we also have to be compassionate. And so that changes how I react. For instance, maybe if a student logs on a little bit late, just acknowledge the fact, hey, I'm so happy to see you today. I'm glad you decided that you were able to join us. Because the truth of the matter is, we don't know the situation, okay? And so that's being cognizant of everything that's going on around them at the time, where they are making an effort to learn. But today I want to focus on being proactive. Okay, what can we do to set the tone the same way that we do when we're in the physical classroom? What can we do in the virtual setting? So I have something called Teach-Tos that I want to talk about, and these are familiar to you because within our school we already actually implement PBIS, and so there are certain expectations for going to the restroom, expectations for walking down the hallway, transitioning from lunch, from transitioning to recess. And so within our classrooms, even in a Zoom setting, there are expectations. There should be expectations, and they need to be taught, but they also need to be clear. So here's a list of 10 that I gave you, and I'm going to give you an example on how we can take a Teach-To and how we should be able to discuss and share the appropriate behavior with our students. So we're looking at number 1 on how to enter the classroom. I think this is important whether we're in the physical or whether we're approaching Zoom. So let's take a look. Entering our classroom. Notice that I have a right way to do it. There's an almost but not quite, and then there's just the wrong way. Okay. And the reason it's important to also have a wrong way is because students need to distinguish, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And so when we're focusing also on the right way, this is the way that you want to teach students, but also allow them time to practice. Practice is key. So we're not just telling, but we allow them to walk through it. And so entering the classroom, I'll greet you because that's appropriate. And so if I say good morning, appropriate responses. Oh, I'm not feeling the best today. I'm fine, thanks. I'm doing okay. Good morning. But I would expect to be able to hear you. I would want your volume to be high or, medium. Tracking the speaker, I would expect you to look at me with your eyes, right? And I would also expect you to have your video camera on, because for me it's important that I make contact and that I make eye contact with you and that we speak. It's a sign of respect. Okay, and then if you notice in the middle, I have the almost but not quite. So maybe the students said it, but maybe they were mumbling. Or maybe they did say it, but their head was turned. They say, yeah, good morning, Miss Carter. Almost, but not quite. I would really appreciate it if I could, if you could look directly at me. And then on the third column, I have examples of what's wrong. Yelling, shouting, using inappropriate or negative word choices to express how you're feeling for the day, or having your camera off, or maybe your eyes are closed. Okay, you're tired, you're sleepy. But again, what's most important is that you allow students to practice the right way. Now, you feel free to demonstrate what the wrong way is. Okay, good morning, Ty. How you doing? Good morning, Miss Carter. Okay, no. That would be the wrong way. Exactly. So, again, you want students to be able to identify the right way. So I'm going to give you another example and also a different way to word or categorize these behaviors. I thought would be fun probably for intermediate students or older students. But if I want to teach two for call and response, we can still have call and response in a virtual setting. But we can use basketball, nothing but net. Ooh, you were on point. You did exactly what we practiced. You met that expectation. A brick, that's the almost but not quite behavior. And an air ball, you just totally missed the expectation. Okay? And so these are very important to teach the same way we would do within the physical classroom setting. We also need to do in the virtual setting. So now for the last part of our PD, we are going to work together and you are going to brainstorm with the team. Choose a virtual classroom Teach-To, listed or unlisted. And as a group, you're going to complete an example of behaviors that are right, almost there, or just, completely wrong, not meeting the expectation. When we finish, we'll have an opportunity to share, and we should be able to walk away with more tools to implement as we continue with our virtual learning. All right?